I call Helen Maguire to move the motion.
Thank you. I beg to move that, that the House has considered relationship education in schools. It's a pleasure to speak under your chairmanship again today. The relationship education our young people currently receive is sadly not addressing the realities of what it means to be a young person today. If we fail to urgently adapt and strengthen our approach to relationship education, we will fail to counter the inappropriate and often misogynistic ideas our young people are exposed to, and we will therefore fail to protect our women and girls from violence that these ideas spur. Prevention starts with education and creating a space for our young people to have conversations about relationships. As a mother of 3 teenagers, 2 boys and a girl, I've spent many years having open and honest conversations with them about relationships. I've done my best to ensure they understand what a healthy relationship looks like and how to treat others with respect. But as every parent knows, children do not always see their parents as the ultimate source of wisdom. They look to their peers, to the internet and to the world around them. And that is why relationship education in schools is so vital. If we get it right, relationship education creates a safe space where young people can discuss these ideas openly with their peers, guided by teachers who are knowledgeable about the current challenges young people face. Yet the statistics paint a worrying picture. 41% of teachers have seen aggressive misogyny in classrooms. 51% have witnessed pupils advocating sexual violence. Only 43% of students feel personally represented and included by the Relationship and Sex Education, RSE. Young people are turning elsewhere to learn. 22% say online sources are their main source of information, while 15% say their primary source is pornography itself. The charity Let Me Know found that 60% of young people they polled didn't know the signs of a healthy or unhealthy relationship. These are shocking figures, and they underline the urgency of getting this right. Absolutely.
Thank you. I thank the honourable member for giving way and bringing such an important debate to the House, and also congratulate her for having 3 teenagers and still holding down this job, which I think is a remarkable achievement. The relationship education is very important for peers, as we know, for young people to relate to their peers. But one of the common complaints I have from parents in my constituency is that a lot of people will learn about relationships from social media. And I know the honourable member has already touched on this, but could she say a bit more about how important it is that we kind of look at the access young people have to social media, and also to support teachers who are looking at banning smartphone usage, but also access to social media in schools, in particular, in their own schools, the support that we can give to these head teachers?
Thank you for the intervention, and it's absolutely vital that we start to address what is going on in social media, and these are elements that we've been calling for, and I think it really is a responsibility of these social media tech giants to actually take on that responsibility themselves. You see, the reality is that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 6 men will experience domestic abuse in their lifetime, and we know that domestic abuse starts young. Those aged 16 to 19 are the most likely to experience it. We need to focus on prevention to stop this at the roots. Sadly, my own constituency of Epsom Newell has felt the devastating reality of violence against women and girls far too acutely in recent years. The impact on families, friends, students and entire school communities has been profound. But let's be clear, violence against women and girls extends beyond my community. It's a national epidemic. In January, the National Audit Office reported that 1 in 12 women are victims of gender-based violence each year. Despite increasing political attention, sexual assault rates among women aged 16 to 59 have risen from 3.4% in 2009-10 to 4.3% in 23-24. A key issue is that prevention has been an afterthought rather than a priority, and this must change. I will give way.
I thank the Honourable Lady for giving way and for bringing this really important debate. I serve on the Public Accounts Committee, and we looked at the NA report on violence against women and girls. In West Yorkshire, the police have developed a really brilliant prevention programme. You touched there on the need, called PolEd, and that goes into schools and teaches young people, both boys and girls, about some of the danger signs around spiking, around inappropriate imagery, around things like consent. And so will the Honourable Member agree with me that it's really important to educate children in a prevention way, both about the danger signs and what's an unhealthy relationship, as well as about what a healthy relationship looks like?
Maguire.
Absolutely, and I thank for that, the Honourable Member for that intervention. It is absolutely key to understand both and to understand what potentially could be the signs of an unhealthy relationship. We need to stop treating violence against women and girls as something that can only be addressed after the fact, after a woman has been assaulted, after she's been coerced, after she's lost her life. We need to act before it happens. And that starts with education and empowering our young people with knowledge of what a healthy relationship is. The recent Netflix series Adolescence has brought national attention to the dangers facing young people today. It follows a 13-year-old boy accused of murdering a female classmate, sparking difficult but necessary conversations about online misogyny and extremist online communities. Teachers and parents are struggling to keep up with the ever-evolving nature of these threats. Teachers need greater support to tackle these issues in schools. Too often they're simply ill-equipped and unprepared to teach RSHE, and 50% of pupils report that power imbalances and pornography were not covered in their lessons. 56% said that what a healthy relationship looks like was not covered either, and surely this should be absolutely key. Incels, the red pill and the manosphere, these are relatively new terms, but the attitudes they promote are not new. This is sexism and male chauvinism repackaged for the digital age, amplified and spread faster than ever before. And that is why we must ensure our education system evolves to counteract this harmful narrative before it takes root in young minds. The Centre for Social Justice's latest report, Lost Boys, highlights that boys in the UK are struggling in education, are more likely to take their own lives, less likely to find stable employment, and more susceptible to being drawn into crime. It also notes that increasing appeal of right-wing and regressive ideologies are among young men. We must address the core challenges our young men are facing and understand how misogyny is evolving, educating parents, teachers, and most importantly, young people themselves. We need to support them. A whole school approach is essential in addressing these issues effectively. This approach encourages schools to review their existing procedures and culture to ensure that they model respectful relationships and gender equality practices across the entire school community. By embedding these values into the fabric of the school environment, we create a culture that actively challenges harmful stereotypes and promotes positive, healthy relationships. Yet last year, we saw the RSHE review become unnecessarily politicised, hijacked by sensationalist headlines and anti-LGBTQ+ rhetoric that served only to fuel division. We cannot afford to play politics with the health, safety and well-being of our children. The focus of any review of RSHE should be on how we can equip young people with the knowledge and tools that they need to navigate the modern world safely. It should address the urgent need to tackle the rise of online misogyny, the increasing prevalence of violence against women and girls, and the damaging impact of pornography and exploitative media on young people's perceptions of relationships. I recently heard from a young constituent, Maddie, who is here today, who was deeply affected by the loss of a teacher in our community. She wrote to me expressing her frustration that while the conversation on violence against women and girls often focuses on policing and reporting, prevention is often overlooked. She told me how her cousin, a newly qualified teacher, was asked to deliver RSHE lessons despite feeling completely underprepared to do so. And she is right to be frustrated. Young people overwhelmingly support strong education on relationships, with 87% saying there should be more teaching about relationships, abuse and sexual health. We owe it to them to listen. RSHE is often an afterthought, added in as an extra and delivered by teachers who are not trained specifically for it. Many are simply given a sheet of paper to read from and do not know how to answer the follow-up questions. That's why I'm calling for urgent reforms to RSHE, including updating the outdated 2019 guidance to reflect the realities of young people's lives today, extending RSHE up to Key Stage 5 so that it reaches 16 to 18-year-olds, making RSHE a key component of initial teacher training, ensuring new teachers are properly equipped to deliver it, and investing in training for school leaders, teachers and governors to understand the online spaces that young people navigate today. We cannot afford to wait until another young woman becomes a statistic. We must act now to equip the next generation with the knowledge and resilience that they need to build safe, healthy relationships. Teaching children about harmful gender stereotypes, consent, respect and healthy peer relationships from the earliest stages is key to preventing violence against women and girls. I urge the government to prioritise prevention, invest in education and listen to the voices of our young people who are asking us for change. The time for action is now.
I thank the Honourable Lady very much. Can I remind all members that they should continue to stand if they wish to contribute to the debate, and given the number of those who've already indicated, I would ask people to limit themselves to about 4 minutes, and I hope we'll be able to get everybody in. The question, therefore, is that this House has considered relationship education in schools. Belle Rivero.
Very much. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. I want to thank the honourable member for Epsom and Eel for securing this crucial debate, and I'm sure we can all agree that every aspect of a child's education is important and plays a crucial role in shaping them into well-rounded members of society. But I think there's a strong argument to suggest that no lesson is more valuable for shaping our young people than relationship and sex education. From teaching them the basics of puberty, reproduction, and how to engage in an adult relationship, to understanding issues around consent, abuse, and sexual and gender identity. Good quality relationship and sex education gives children a crucial basis of relationships that will influence their interactions with others for the rest of their lives. But the reality is in the UK we're failing to provide our children with that quality relationship and sex education that they need, and this is leading to a number of issues and gaps in their understanding of healthy relationships. Our children's RSE classes are grossly, inadequately and severely outdated, and in some cases not taught at all. Despite RSE being compulsory for all primary school pupils, 50% of students reported receiving no RSE classes during the COVID lockdown. And we are of course talking about age-appropriate relationship sex education, because the catch-all term has, and sensationalist headlines has led some parents to believe that their children are being taught things at certain ages when they're obviously not, and this has only helped fuel certain issues, which has been awful for promoting healthy and proper relationship sex education teaching. We also find that the latest Sex Education Forum report found that only 50% of the 16 to 70-year-olds surveyed even rated their RSE classes as good or very good. This is obviously an improvement on the previous year's findings, but it still demonstrates that relationship and sex education of our young people is simply not good enough. Now, I'm sure everybody has by now, or hopefully, as you've heard about the truly gripping Netflix drama Adolescence, and for any members who haven't, I couldn't recommend it strongly enough. It's crucial watching for anyone who works with, or indeed, as we do, legislates for children. It touches on a number of issues, as you've heard before, relating to incel culture, the manosphere, and the increasingly concerning attitude towards women and girls that's infecting our young boys. Often we talk about incel culture and these toxic attitudes towards women and indeed men. We fail to properly come up with solutions about what we can do to tackle them. Or, of course, we land on things such as limited social media access for young people, placing more onus on social media sites to monitor online chatter and taking down harmful posts and videos, reducing the airtime given to toxic individuals who perpetuate this kind of nonsense. And these are all really useful options that we have to consider and take action on, but they are far from the solution. We really ought to be looking at the role that education can play in combating misinformed views. The core of relationship and sex education, beyond teaching children the basics of biology, is about teaching healthy relationships. It's about teaching young girls and boys about how to properly respect and interact with someone they are in a relationship with, whether it's romantic, sexual, platonic or familial relationships. Their understanding of these relationships can be informed by good quality education. And it goes without saying that the opposite is also true. Poor quality RSE can drastically impact a child's understanding of relationships and cause untold damage. So we need a comprehensive relationship and sex education that's age appropriate and delivered by well-trained teachers who could be crucial to combating this toxic incel ideology, or at the very least provide students with correct information that will counter the stuff that they read on the internet or watch on YouTube. Effective classes can provide a safe, non-judgmental space for children to ask questions. If they don't have that, then we risk either leaving their questions unanswered or leaving them to the mercy of some Andrew Tate-esque figures who will fill their heads with poison. Both options are cause for concern, but the latter is nearly unthinkable. Like all forms of discrimination, misogyny is ignorance, and education is the best tool against ignorance, but it has to be properly funded and teachers have to be properly trained to deliver it. So I sincerely hope to hear from the Minister on the concrete steps the government will be taking to invest in RSE. Obviously, mandating it to be compulsory is important, but proper funding and training ultimately mean it will be done well, and it being done badly is almost as bad as not teaching it at all. Thank you.
Jim Shannon.
And again, it's a pleasure to serve under your chairship for I think it's the third time this afternoon, so we're on a roll here, you know. Can I commend the Honourable Lady for Epsom and Eel for leading the debate, and for a subject which is quite can be quite difficult, I think, is a fair way of putting it. And I want to give a perspective, if I can, which, from a parental point of view, we're not in opposition, but I just want to put the record down, if you don't mind, please, in that one. I'm pleased here to represent the case for Northern Ireland. I understand my honourable colleague and friend will be doing something similar in a few minutes. And I want to have a say on what their children have been taught in school. So, my contribution, Mr Chairman, or Sir Jeremy, and speech today will be along the lines of parental rights and how important it is to have that on record. Many will be aware there's been a shift in the content that schools teach, and which is approved by boards of governors, who should be allowed to ensure that RSE is taught in line with community value. There should be a commitment to best practice and good relations between parents and teachers. Always has to be that there. Always has to be, in my opinion, a key issue in school. An example of this was highlighted in Victoria Primary School in Newton Ards in my constituency of Strangford, where they brought the parents to an open night the night before teaching was to take place, with the children, to allow interested parents to know what way the sensitive topics would be taught, and to allow them to understand the tools to help them follow up with their child afterwards. And what I felt was a really constructive and positive way forward. I'm very pleased to see the Minister in her place, and I'm sure that, as the Minister always does, tries to reassure us in where we are. So I seek some of that reassurance from the Minister when she gets a chance to respond. The type of sensitive approach was welcomed by parents, and to me, I believe, speaks well of a school who looks at education in a very holistic approach with the home life, which is part of where we are. There is no doubt that teachers play a central role in helping children grow up into successful adults who are equipped to deal with a fast-moving world with skills they need to be safe. A much faster world than the world that I was brought up in, but then I'm of a certain age, so people would probably understand that. However, in times of RSE education, this is where some of the most contentious issues will be taught, and I believe parents, Sir Jeremy, have every right to exercise their authority over what they deem safe and appropriate for their children to be taught. So I'm putting the marker down quite clearly for parents on behalf of their children. There are issues of a personal nature, matters of morality, and it's best left for parents to decide how to raise their children. Their input into this process must be critical. It is not for the state to decide the morality and the standards of each family in the United Kingdom. I say it with respect to people, and I want to be quite clear. We have understanding that parents raise children differently. I may disagree with others as to what they choose to teach their children, but we have respect that this is a democratic society and that all values, no matter how much we disagree, must be respected, to uphold freedom of conscience and, I believe, freedom of religion. There's a very blurry line between relationships and sex education, but I'll always continue to be a voice for the parents and for what they deem appropriate for their child to be taught in school. There must be regulation in place to ensure that, should a school decide to implement changes to RSE education, that a parent has a right to withdraw their child. And I put that marker down as well if it's going the wrong way and the parents don't like it. To conclude, Mr Chairman, within your timescale, I urge the Government to not ever push forward with any changes that will diminish parental authority and control. I also ask that the Minister continue to speak with our counterparts in the devolved nations to ensure that parents who are genuinely seeking to safeguard their children are afforded the respect in terms of classroom syllabus and have their rights to reasonably held views protected. Parental rights first and foremost. Thank you.
Joe Morris.
Thank you, Sir Jeremy. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship for the second time this afternoon. I want to again thank the Honourable Member for bringing forward this really important debate. And a couple of weeks ago, my honourable friend from Knowsley raised the difference of adolescence, which I think has touched everyone in the House, produced by Stephen Graham and Christine Tremarco during PMQs. I strongly support her call for the screenings to be delivered in schools. It's crucial to spark conversation, education, urgent change around online male radicalisation and violence against women and girls. And like everyone, I hope in this room, I was assured and pleased by the Prime Minister's response. And once again, I recognise that we have a very real and very abhorrent problem sort of perpetuating in our society. We're experiencing an epidemic of gender-based violence. We've had a disjointed approach to tackling the epidemic that I think has failed. We've failed to protect women and girls from violence, failed to improve outcomes for victims, and failed to combat deep-rooted sexism and misogyny across the UK. Instead, I see from my casework an increase in peer-on-peer abuse cases in primary and secondary schools, schools that should be safe spaces, that should provide a secure environment for children to learn, places that parents should feel comfortable sending their children. And we need to ensure that safeguarding is in place to ensure that protection. Children going to school and experiencing abuse is despicable and inexcusable. We need to urgently look at how we address these issues, and curriculums must ensure that exposure to social media and online platforms providing violent, misogynistic, racist and homophobic content can be properly countered. I want to very briefly mention the family of Holly Newton, a constituent of mine who was tragically murdered by her former boyfriend, and who campaigned tirelessly to raise awareness about recognising signs of domestic abuse. And I want to associate myself with the calls from Holly's mum for lowering the age that teenagers can be considered domestic abuse victims. And when you look out my office window on Beaumont Street in Hexham, there's a wonderful installation, ribbons dedicated to to victims of domestic abuse, and a single ribbon for Holly of a different colour, just to emphasise that she is not counted in those statistics. It's something that is incredibly moving whenever I look at it. And since I was elected, I've worked with Northumberland Domestic Abuse Services, who provide valuable support to some of the most vulnerable people across the county, in England's most sparsely populated county. I know that there are many people in this chamber who have talked about the rural issues that we face in terms of addressing those unique challenges. And the staff and the volunteers at NDAS are truly some of the most inspirational people I've met in my short time in this house. And also, when I go out and I visit schools across the constituency, one of the things that teachers say to me, whether it's in the more kind of urbanised parts, in the kind of Tyne Valley belt, or whether it's in the really far-flung schools up in the far north or south of the constituency, is a concern that male students are being bombarded with this kind of toxic view of the world. And, you know, I grew up, I was born in 1991, I consider myself relatively young. You know, I grew up when Facebook was still a new thing, and when getting your first Facebook account was, you know, you almost had to have a chat with your mum and dad about it to, like, get their sign-off. You know, I was exposed to, you know, to what we thought was an online revolution, but it was a drip feed compared to the tsunami now that this generation are exposed to. And having been through the pandemic and now going through this, it's an incredibly concerning and shocking thing that, yeah, makes me certainly realise just how much the world has shifted under our feet in what is only really a decade and a half since I was you know, in the education system. Happily, yes.
Thank my honourable friend for giving way. I wondered if he had managed to hear Gareth Southgate talking in the Dimbleby lecture about the fact that boys need positive male role models in the real world, getting back to people like football coaches and scout leaders, youth club leaders, and even more male teachers. And I wondered if my honourable friend would agree with me that in the face of that tsunami of online abuse, and to help boys have real world role models as well.
I think it probably won't surprise her to know that I think I've seen everything that Gareth Southgate said since he unfortunately left being England manager. I think my fiancée had to talk me into taking down a mocked-up Time Man of the Year Gareth Southgate work of art from shortly after she moved in, I should say. I think I'm getting dragged slightly off course. And I won't distract the House with my interior decorating.
I will remind him that we do need to proceed to other speakers, so if I can ask him to draw his remarks to a close.
Shortly wind up. So I'm very pleased with the progress being made in putting those specialist rape and sexual offences team into every police force and working to improve how domestic abuse is processed in 999 handling. This is a matter of culture. I want to congratulate again the Honourable Member for Epsom Ewell for bringing forward the important debate and for allowing all members to discuss how we tackle this emerging, growing and potentially endemic problem.
Thank you. For the assistance of colleagues, I'm going to try and call the opposition front benches for their 5 minutes each at 5:08, and then the Minister after that. So you'll be able to see we can't, I'm afraid, any longer allow 4 minutes each if we're all going to get in. Nearer 3 will help. So if I can ask all colleagues to do that. Vera Hobhouse.
Thank you, Sir Jeremy. And I would just quickly congratulate my honourable friend for bringing this debate to this chamber. The government has set ambitious targets to tackle violence against women and girls, but these goals will not be achieved without addressing relationship education in our schools. Ending violence is first about prevention. Teaching children from a young age what a healthy relationship looks like is key to this change. They must need to be taught to know about respect, consent and equality. We Liberal Democrats have long supported comprehensive, inclusive and evidence-based relationship education in our schools. It is crucial these lessons include information about inclusivity and the needs of LGBT students too. The well-documented Ofsted review from 2021 revealed shocking levels of sexual harassment in UK schools. Their report found that sexual harassment was so widespread it must be addressed for all children and young people. Their review highlighted several key issues. One of the biggest concerns was that students did not feel the need to report harassment because they saw it as normal. This shows how ingrained unhealthy behaviours can be in our schools. Teachers were often unaware of the scales of the problem too, not realising how serious it was. And may I just quickly come to the upskirting bill. So years ago already when we looked at upskirting, young boys were doing it quite regularly and I just thought it was a laugh, not realising that they were actually victims and how deeply hurt and victimised those who were targeted felt about it. And this is exactly where relationship training starts, that you understand what you're actually doing to somebody. And this can only be done through good education in schools where these things are openly discussed rather than just skirted about. Relationship and sex education must teach what constitutes acceptable behaviour. Many teachers admitted they were not properly prepared to teach these sensitive topics. When a maths or science teacher is asked to teach about consent, healthy relationships or sharing sexual images, it is not a surprise they feel underqualified. And I was one of those teachers who tried to teach 14 or 15-year-old boys. And clearly, they know already quite a lot. So we can't just talk about the bees and the butterflies. And I would suggest that actually sex and relationship education should start earlier than in secondary schools, by which time young people have already acquired a lot of unhealthy information that then we can only catch up with if we know the extent of where they got their information from. The Women and Equality Select Committee published their own report in 2023, which found that the delivery of relationship and sex education has been inconsistent. I think that's a polite way of saying not good enough. It also suggested the government take further steps to ensure teachers have the time and resources to learn how to deliver these lessons effectively. I hope we do not have to wait for another report before we finally address these issues. In the online world that we live in, we know that algorithms often target young people with harmful content, whether it is misogynistic, like Andrew Tate, who spread toxic views on women, or influencers sharing dangerous content about eating disorders. Social media is full of risks. These platforms must take responsibility for the content shared on their platforms. The Online Safety Act aims to make the internet safer for children and young people. It holds social media platforms accountable for harmful content, but they alone cannot deliver that change. If the government is serious about ending violence against women and girls, it must take sex and relationship education very seriously. And as I said, I suggest we start earlier than in secondary schools. Teaching children from a young age what a healthy relationship looks like is the most important thing that we can teach our children ultimately. It is time that we empower young people with a range of knowledge about healthy relationship, consent, online safety and inclusivity.
With apologies to all concerned, I'm afraid I'm going to have to impose a 2-minute time limit to get everybody in. Lee Ingham.
Your chairship, and I also thank the honourable member for Epsom and Ewell for raising this debate on a subject I know is very close to her heart. I don't need to declare an interest, but prior to being elected as an MP, I worked with young women and girls in schools on this specific issue, so it's something that I really care about too. And I'd also like to say very quickly I know how seriously this government takes this issue, and I'll always be proud to stand under our commitment to halve violence against women and girls in the next decade. However, right now, the evidence speaks for itself. In 2022, Revealing Reality found that 60% of 15 to 18-year-old girls have been asked to send a nude picture. Anecdotally, I think that's much less than the actual reality. This is a staggering statistic, highlighting the urgent need for robust and comprehensive relationship education. Peer-on-peer sexual harassment is also a growing concern, exacerbated, as others have mentioned, by the rapid rise of technology and social media. The work of organisations such as Girl Guiding has shed light on the lived experiences of young people, particularly girls who face harassment, coercion and harmful social pressures. Their 2023 report found that a quarter of young people felt their questions about sex and relationships were not answered by RSHE lessons in schools. We Don't Tell Our Teachers, a 2022 report from Estin, which is the Welsh version of Ofsted, found that many young people do not disclose their experiences of harassment or abuse to teachers because they don't feel they'll be taken seriously or nothing will change. Schools must be environments where students feel safe to speak up, and we need to start equipping teachers with the right training and the right support. I know that some argue that relationship education should be left to parents, and while parents play a vital role in this space in explaining healthy relationships, schools also play a central role in creating a safe, structured environment where young people can learn about healthy relationships in an evidence-based way. As I said, I'm proud of this government's commitment to women and girls.
We must move on. Rebecca Smith.
Thank you, Jeremy. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I congratulate you on another for holding this debate. And we've obviously got some fantastic statutory guidance from 2020 and draft guidance from 2024, and I would love to hear from the Minister as to when they're likely to respond back to those draft guidance, because quite a lot has already been done in this area and we must make account of that. I echo the words of the Honourable Member for Strangford in terms of the rights of parents, and I think one of the safeguards that has been put in previous guidance is to enable them to see curriculum materials and have those opt out, and I think it's vital that we ensure that and would want to see that in anything coming forward. Just briefly, I want to touch on the Plymouth Violence Against Women and Girls Commission that was instituted as a result of two tragedies in the city in 2021 and 2022. And one of the recommendations that came out of the report that we brought forward, which I chaired, was for a whole school approach to tackling violence against women and girls, something that's been mentioned already, and I think it would be very good to hear from the Minister about that today. It's also something that the End Violence Against Women Coalition in their report It's About Time have highlighted. I think sex education is one thing, relationship education, but clearly how we can embed healthy relationships, tackling misogyny and sexism right across the school community is vital, and we need to make sure that that's something we look at going forward. And I think just to finish, Ms. Chair, the inconsistency of what we're finding across schools locally is key. I was alarmed to receive an email from a young lesbian recently who at 18 years old says that she'd only recently found out that STDs could be contracted by young women who are same-sex attracted in that way. That highlights to me the inconsistency about the delivery of the existing guidance, and is something that we need to make sure we look at, because if young women like her are experiencing that, what are they also not receiving? There's a huge amount to tackle: porn, Vogue, dealing with all of these sexist behaviours. I know this won't be the last debate we have, and I look forward to contributing in the future.
Thank you. Maya Ellis.
Friend. When I became a new parent, I was shocked to my core to see my communities, both in person and online, the extent that relationships between new parents suddenly descend into coercive control, gaslighting, financial abuse, and in the worst cases, which are still far too many, physical abuse. For Baby's Sake Trust found that 40% of parents who experienced domestic abuse said it occurred during their baby's first 1,001 days from pregnancy until the baby's second birthday. I would also, so it's critical to me that this is about how we embed this early on. I'm the Vice Chair of the APPG on sexual reproductive health and recently chaired a round table to celebrate 20 years since the Teenage Pregnancy Strategy, and their key ask was about focusing reforms on upstream prevention and not downstream crisis management. I'd also like to say I'd love to see more support for parents as their children receive relationship guidance in school. A huge number of young people will receive strong progressive advice in schools about relationships and then go home to a place where those progressive relationships don't exist. If via information that child brings home from school, a parent can realise they're in a relationship themselves that is not okay, but is in fact financially abusive or controlling, for example, then so much the better. Chloe Comby has recently written a really powerful piece in The Independent on the TV show Adolescence, where she made the point that very little commentary on the show has asked what young people themselves thought about it. Multiple organisations such as Brooke have highlighted the importance of including the student voice in RSHE curriculum design. In 2009 guidance, schools were instructed to consult parents. However, for RSC to be relevant, the needs and preferences of pupils must be reflection in the lessons taught in schools. I'd like to pay tribute to Chloe Comby and others like Joe Davis at the Wild Young Parents Project for being on the front line and at the forefront of how we instill great relationships among young people. And finally, I'd just like to say that the reality is, as a society, we're often not great at relationships as adults. And so as we hopefully do protect and extend relationship advice for young people, I hope we have the humility to learn alongside them too. Thank you.
Thank you. Alex Brewer.
Thank you, Jeremy. Chair. We are living in a time marked by increasing polarisation. Teenage boys and girls are drifting apart, driven by an online culture that fills a void where important discussions should be happening. I have spoken to teachers across my constituency, and the picture they paint is a troubling one. They have reported that the behaviour, particularly of boys in schools, is deteriorating, with a notable disparity in how male and female staff are treated. Teachers in North East Hampshire and across the country are working tirelessly, yet behavioural issues are worsening. Online sexist cultures are manifesting themselves in many ways, including in the form of persistent backchat towards female teachers. High-profile online influencers have found their way to reach boys and young men who are struggling with their identities and masculinity. We must rethink our understanding of masculinity and what it means to be a man, and we must do this in a safe, supportive environment that nurtures healthy development and respect. Feminism is not a dirty word. It is as good for men and boys as it is for women and girls, but that part of the conversation is frequently missing. Worryingly, abusive behaviour within young relationships is increasingly common, and most incidences of online sexual abuse now involve children offending against other children. 61% of children and young people also reported they were unsure and unaware of where to seek support if affected by domestic abuse. Schools are hubs of learning and centres of influence. Children must be able to define their place in the world, understand their identity, and feel empowered to be themselves within this environment of support and understanding. And only with this can we expect young people to have the tools to navigate the internet and their real-life interactions positively and safely. We must create legislation outlined by my honourable friend, the member for Epsom and Ewell, in her excellent opening remarks, that paves the way for a curriculum that prepares all children.
Again, I apologise for interrupting. Alistair Strathern.
Thank you, Sir Jeremy. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship, and I congratulate the honourable member for securing such an important debate. I think it'd be fair to say the TV drama Adolescence has really captured the imagination of the nation, and the spotlight it's shone on our collective failure to ensure we're keeping pace with the range of harmful content around sex, gender and relationships that young people are increasingly being exposed to online. I know for many parents, for many young people, for those working in this profession though, it actually just highlighted trends that have been all too apparent for them for quite some time. And one of the heartbreaking moments that I have at MP is speaking to young people and their parents about some of the harms they've been exposed to online that we simply haven't equipped them to be safe in experiencing. Whether it's the Children Commissioner to Ofsted, there's some pretty damning statistics about the range of violent pornography and graphic sexual and misogynistic content that young people are now being exposed to, and the way in which that's bleeding into their attitudes towards women, sex and relationships in schools and later on in life. It's no doubt to me too that this has been exacerbated by a social media landscape that often atomises young people's interactions with new ideas and narratives when it comes to sex and relationships, and whose algorithms can often prompt and reinforce harmful voices and content rather than promoting clitoral reflection. It's little wonder that in such a backdrop, really toxic voices like Andrew Tate have started to take root. And while there was some good news in More Commons' recent research into young people's role models, it should scare a lot of us that 25% of 16 to 21-year-olds saw Andrew Tate as someone young people will be likely to look up to. The solutions cut right across government. I think it'd be fair to say that, judging by debates I've shared with some colleagues in this room, many of us would like to see Ofcom go much further in its implementation of the Children's Code to make sure we're doing lots more to protect young people from exposure to some of these harms in the first place. But we owe it to the young people in school right now to make sure the curriculum is setting up as best they can, leveraging some of the best practice resources that we know great organisations like Internet Watch Foundation have got out there already, including helping young people challenge image sharing online, and making sure that collectively we don't lose the moment that adolescents have given us.
Again, I apologise. If she can keep herself to a minute, I'll call Carla Lockhart.
Thank you.
to the Honourable Member for bringing this forward. And her and I will differ on some of the gender ideology. I believe that this government, when they introduce the RSHE regulations, that they need to be CAS compliant, and I would welcome Dr Hilary Cass. She pointed out in her review that the importance of what happens in schools cannot be underestimated. This is because some schools have been guilty of engaging in the potentially dangerous process of socially transitioning children. They go along with the child's wish to identify as a sex other than their birth sex. And I would encourage this government, when introducing, that they take the helpful draft consultation on this, that schools should not teach about the broader concept of gender identity. And when introducing it, that they take above all parental input and also school ethos, where there is a Christian ethos, that those schools should be able to uphold their Christian ethos when teaching relationship education.
I thank the Honourable Lady and all members for their cooperation. We now move on to the front bench speeches, beginning with the Liberal Democrat spokesperson, Munira Wilson.
Thank you very much, Sir Jeremy, and it's a great pleasure to serve under your chairmanship this afternoon. And can I congratulate my honourable friend, the member for Epsom and Ewell, for securing this incredibly important debate. Now, as we've heard from many honourable members on all sides of the chamber today, it is vital that all children and young people are equipped to develop safe, healthy and happy relationships. And it's vital that they recognise what is inappropriate, unacceptable and abusive behaviour. Parents and carers, wider family and friends networks, as well as schools, have an important role to play in developing this knowledge and understanding. However, we can't take this knowledge for granted. And as we've heard, with the proliferation of harmful online content served up to our children and young people, they are at increased risk of encountering extreme and harmful content that distorts their understanding of how we should be interacting with each other. According to Internet Matters, girls experience a disproportionate level of harm online, with 3 in 4 girls aged 13 to 16 reporting harmful online experiences. And sadly, Sir Jeremy, this translates into inappropriate behaviour in real life. Now, despite some really excellent work that I've heard about by secondary schools in my constituency, worryingly, a survey by Kingston and Richmond Youth Council found that 40% of girls surveyed had been physically followed in a way that made them feel unsafe or uncomfortable. 50% had felt pressured into sending intimate pictures of themselves online, but 83% of those who experienced sexual harassment did not report it. The survey also found that over 20% of boys surveyed were not confident of knowing that exposure of body parts is a form of sexual harassment, and 69% would not or were unsure whether they would intervene if they witnessed their friends sexually harassing someone. Now, the National Police Chiefs Council warned last year that young boys were being radicalised by influencers like Andrew Tate, and talked of epidemic levels of violence against women and girls, driven in part by extreme online misogyny. And that's why I was so shocked to hear the Leader of the Opposition today be so dismissive of the issue on LBC, saying that there were bigger problems that we should be focused on. We need a culture change in all aspects of society, and we need to encourage the men in our lives, our brothers, fathers, friends, boyfriends, husbands, sons, to stand up against toxic masculinity, to demonstrate to the young men in their lives that what it means to be compassionate and kind in all relationships, and that this is a strength, not a weakness. And that culture change must come in part from the education that we provide in the classroom. Age-appropriate relationships and sex education at school has a crucial role to play, alongside the role of parents and carers. The Liberal Democrats believe that an age-appropriate RSE curriculum should be led by a qualified teacher and delivered in a safe, non-judgmental setting, and should include teaching about sexual consent, LGBTQ+ relationships, and issues surrounding explicit images. Because all young people deserve access to high-quality education that empowers them to make safe and informed choices. Not only that, ensuring children learn about consent, healthy relationships, and online risks like pornography and sexting is essential for safeguarding. Schools and teachers need proper funding, training and support, as well as resources to deliver high-quality RSHE. And so we, as Liberal Democrats, will continue to campaign for specialist RSE training to ensure that teachers feel confident in delivering sensitive topics effectively. And I hope the Minister will confirm when she plans to publish the updated RSHE guidance. She responded to a written question from me today, but again, it didn't set out the timelines. I don't know if she can fill us in when she gets up to speak. And just before I finish, Sir Jeremy, I just wanted to touch a little bit on what we must also be pressing the social media giants to do. I think they need to be much more toughly regulated. I know that you, Sir Jeremy, were pretty active on the online safety bill when it was going through Parliament, and since we've got to see it implemented rigorously, and Liberal Democrats would like to see the digital age of consent raised, and we'll be pushing for that change through the data bill. If we're serious about tackling violence against women and girls, this has to start with prevention. We've got to tackle the online giants, but schools have also got to play a key role in education. We must support an education system where every child is free to be themselves and reach their full potential, unencumbered by fear and abuse, receiving the support they need to thrive.
Thank you. I call the opposition spokesperson, Rebecca Paul.
Thank you, Sir Jeremy. It is a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship today. Firstly, I want to thank the Honourable Member for Epsom and Ewell for bringing this important debate on the importance of relationship education in schools, and for touching upon the harrowing stories of violence against women and girls in her constituency. Before I proceed further, I want to offer my heartfelt condolences to the families and friends, colleagues and pupils of those impacted. In the decade from 2008 to 2018, around 3 women a week were killed by men in the UK, and shockingly, around 1 in 4 has been raped or sexually assaulted. This shows the gravity of the misogyny in our society faced by women and girls. Although relationship education can only go so far in addressing male violence against women and girls, it plays an important role in educating our young people on what positive and healthy relationships look like, and the importance of putting in place clear boundaries. These skills are vital in navigating relationships, recognising potential abuse, including that of coercive control, and knowing how and when to seek help. Relationship education was made compulsory in all primary schools and secondary schools in 2020. While schools are able to determine their own curriculum, they must have regard to the statutory guidance released in 2019. From my experience of looking at some of the school materials used, it seems that focus in relationship education has a tendency to gravitate towards other topics rather than spending the necessary amount of time on propagating positive and respectful relationships between boys and girls and addressing many of the issues raised today. This is something that schools and government need to reflect upon. An important part of relationship education is teaching young people about the risks and harms of the internet and social media. With damaging online porn available at the touch of a button on smartphones, young men are fed a constant stream of misogynistic content that will of course change how they view women and girls. Whilst they are able to access hours of degrading and violent content directed at women whenever they like, the relatively small amount of time spent learning the opposite in a classroom cannot hope to offset this harmful influence. That is why the Conservatives have been calling for a ban on smartphones in schools for under-16s. This will at least go part of the way to promoting children's well-being and protecting them from harmful content on social media during the school day. It's also important to note that for many young people, the distinction between the online world and the real world can be blurred. So they need the skills to navigate this safely. We all know that online people feel more anonymous and may say things that they would never say face-to-face, or they may present themselves as someone different to who they actually are. On top of this, they are fed a stream of factually incorrect information and unobtainable body images. In accordance with DfE guidance, schools should be alive to issues such as everyday sexism, misogyny, homophobia and gender stereotypes, and take positive action to build a culture where these are not tolerated. In spite of this, I'm afraid to say that sexual violence and harassment does take place in schools, so it's vital that such behaviours are not tolerated and never acceptable. Any reports of sexual violence or harassment should be taken seriously, and it must be recognised that girls are much more likely to be victims, with boys the most likely perpetrator. With that being said, it's vitally important that our boys are not made to feel that this behaviour is inevitable as a result of them being male, and indeed it is only a minority. When it comes to our boys, we should be valuing their unique attributes and not demonising them or making them feel bad for having masculine traits. These traits are not toxic in the great majority of cases. The requirement to deliver RHSE has led to a surge in outside providers making available their resources to school. Some are good and some are not so good. Guidance is clear that schools should not, under any circumstances, work with external agencies that take or promote extreme political positions or use materials produced by such agencies. Accordingly, schools are required to assess each resource to ensure it is age appropriate and sensitive to their needs. And they should be providing examples to parents on request. Parents should be given every opportunity to understand the purpose and content of materials, and it is certainly not appropriate for such materials to be withheld under the guise of copyright restrictions. All parents have a right to know what a school is teaching their child. It was confirmed by the previous Education Secretary under the Conservative government that materials used in the classroom can be shared irrespective of copyright restrictions. It should never be forgotten that parents and carers are ultimately responsible for the education of their children. So in most cases, teaching in schools should be done with parents, not contrary to them, and in a way sympathetic to their values and beliefs. And that starts with being transparent about what is being taught. It's also important to note that schools have a legal obligation to be politically impartial when teaching. This means children must be offered a balanced presentation of opposing views. It seems that many schools have struggled with this impartiality requirement on this specific topic, which drove additional guidance to be released in 2022. I note the reference to a backlash.
I know the Honourable Lady will be coming swiftly to a conclusion so we can get the Minister in.
Thank you. I note the reference to a backlash against RHSE lessons due to anti-LGBTQ+ rhetoric, and I want to push back on this. It is not unreasonable for parents to raise their concerns about schools teaching factually incorrect, ideological and damaging content specifically on gender identity. They are right to raise this, and it is indeed the responsible thing to do. But the one thing I do agree with is that the teaching of such harmful concepts as fact has done damage to the important subject of RHSE as a whole. In closing,
We really must move on, I'm afraid, to the Minister. Minister Catherine McKinnon.
Thank you, Sir Jeremy, and it is a pleasure to serve under you as Chair. And I congratulate the Honourable Member for Epsom and Ewell on securing this debate on relationships education in school and for highlighting the vital role that education plays in preventing violence, including violence against women and girls. And I know the Honourable Member has fought long and hard for justice for victims of violence and domestic abuse, and spoke recently in the House on these issues. And I know that she has, stood alongside members of her community after the tragic murder of her constituents, Emma and Letty Patterson. And I want to take the opportunity to offer my sincere condolences to everyone affected by that. And as a schools minister and as a mum, I know it's vital that we reach children early before harmful attitudes take root. And the classroom must be a place where they learn the values of respect, equality and consent from the very start. And the aim of relationship education is to support all young people to build positive relationships, to keep themselves and others safe. And that education must equip them for adult life and to make a positive contribution to society. It really is a top priority for the government, and it's central to our mission to make the country's streets safer. And I want to get straight to the heart of the problem and acknowledge the important role not only of schools, but of all services that support young people to thrive. And that's why the government's opportunity mission is dedicated to setting up every child with the best start in life, helping every child to achieve and thrive in school and build skills that will allow young people to forge happy and healthy and fulfilling lives. Opportunity, thriving, belonging and purpose, they're not just nice words. They are the foundations of healthy individuals and of a healthy society. And they are the best tools we have for helping young people build healthy relationships to combat violence and prejudice, including misogyny. Misogyny is not innate, it is learned behaviour. And that is why I agree we must not talk as if boys and young men are the problem. The rise of misogynistic influences online is a symptom of a number of wider issues that we must address. And yes, as part of this mission, we will equip our young people and children with the skills they need to form strong, positive relationships. We will support them to learn about kindness and respect.
will equip them to navigate in a world in which 79% of young people have seen violent pornography before they turn 18. A world in which social media platforms routinely expose young people to misogynistic and violent content, and in which more and more of our social interactions are online. And that's why our review of the statutory guidance for relationship, sex and health education has young people and their well-being at its heart, and why we're working as quickly as we can to publish revised guidance as soon as possible this year. We've spoken to teachers and experts and young people, and we are determined to harness their collective wisdom and change the conversation about relationships. Young people have told us they want their relationship education to be interactive, to be participatory, and to reflect the real complexities of building positive relationships. Experts have told us that they need support to help young people to develop the skills for healthy communication, empathy, and emotional regulation. Telling young people about consent is not enough. Telling them about the law is not enough. Young people deserve better than that. They deserve to have teachers who will role model honest and kind communication about sex, about emotions, empathy, and kindness. And let's not pretend relationships are easy. Children need support starting in early primary to develop the skills they need for handling disappointment, for paying attention to the needs and boundaries of others, for understanding their own needs and feelings. In secondary schools, teachers must step up to the challenge of opening difficult conversations with their pupils, and we know many teachers already do this brilliantly. Young people need to learn that romantic and sexual relationships are about care, kindness, and generosity. They're about communication, listening, and connection, and that pornography is not a true representation of sex. Our revised statutory guidance will ensure that relationships and sex education reflect the reality of young people today. Artificial intelligence, the dominance of social media, the availability of pornography, the rise in online misogyny, we cannot ignore the impacts of these trends on young people. Our revised statutory guidance for RSHE will be clear that teachers must be equipped to open conversations with boys and girls about what positive masculinity and femininity mean today, and to help young people to develop positive role models that support their self-esteem and their sense of purpose. I don't have much time, I'm afraid.
Very short point. So, parents of LGBTQ plus children are concerned that the 2024 guidance that the previous government consulted on is actually providing a hostile environment, and those conversations are not being able to happen about trans and binary children. I wondered if the Minister would consider reverting to the 2023 guidance in that.
Minister.
So we will obviously be publishing our RSHE guidance as soon as possible, and it will be focused very much on keeping children's well-being at its heart. Education can support young people to develop positive attitudes towards people who are different from them, and to exercise critical thinking when they encounter situations involving harmful behaviour and harmful sexual violence. These are conversations that we do need to have collectively, without stigmatising boys or treating them as a problem, but recognising that good relationship skills benefit everybody, boys and girls, men and women. Our intention is that the revised guidance sparks a culture change in the delivery of RSHE, and it signals our aspirations that are high for RSHE. We recognise that schools and teachers need support to have these conversations with young people, and we are exploring how best to provide this support in the current tight financial circumstances. This work is a central part of the government's ambition to halve violence against women and girls within a decade. We cannot achieve it without a significant culture change around equality and around our conceptions of masculinity and femininity. Culture change goes beyond schools, but it can germinate in the ideas of children that they're exposed to in schools, the ways they learn to relate to one another who are different from them, and their sense of purpose and belonging that schools can provide. I cannot emphasise how much I welcome the renewed focus on violence against women and girls following the release of the Netflix new drama, Adolescence, which many I know have mentioned. And I'm grateful to the Honourable Member for Epsom and York for providing this opportunity to continue this conversation here in the House. It's not a new issue for any of us. It was in 2020 that Everyone's Invited started to collect the testimonies of young people who had experienced sexual violence and sexual abuse. And in 2021, Ofsted published their review of sexual abuse in schools and colleges. Everyone's Invited has now shown us that rape culture and misogyny are increasingly appearing in primary schools. And we'll be publishing a new Tackling Violence Against Women and Girls strategy later this year, which will set out what further actions we will be taking, as well as the progress that we have made so far. Turning the tide on misogyny is not going to be a simple task, and we do all need to keep talking about it. We need to keep learning, we need to keep challenging, and we need to ensure that boys and young men remain part of that conversation.
Thank you very much. I think we probably don't have enough time for the Honourable Lady to wind up the debate, I'm afraid, but I will put the question, which is that this House has considered relationship education in schools. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. The contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order. The sitting stands adjourned.